Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, and Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, optimize, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And I am very excited about today's guest, David Pollard. Hi, David.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to have you on the podcast. And we need to give a big shout out to Victoria Downing, which I was on her podcast. She was on my podcast, and she's the one who introduced us. So thank you, Victoria. And I'm going to include the episode that I did with Victoria in the show notes. And of course, I'm also going to give a shout out for my client, Chris Towson, who introduced me to Victoria, because that's how it goes. You know, one person introduced another, and before you know it, you have a whole network. So thank you both. All right. So David, let me read your bio so the listeners will know why I'm so excited to be interviewing you today. So you are an architect, builder, and business owner and entrepreneur. And you have a passion for bringing good home design to the masses, which is really cool. You have a Chicago-based remodeling company, LivCo, LivCo, and it was founded as a collaboration between architect, builder, and client, eliminating the inefficiencies found in the traditional triangle of distrust of design, bid, build model, right? So you basically want it all together under one roof.
Exactly.
And yeah, and so it's innovative. So we're going to talk about it. I'm always inspired by thinking outside the box, innovation, entrepreneurs that started a business and became very successful at it and created something. And obviously you also use a lot of processes and procedures, and you're convinced that processes and procedures is the way to go. So I love hearing the story. So tell us, how did you get started with LivCo? What led to it?
Yeah, it came out of an architecture career that maybe was a little unfulfilled from what I thought it was. And, I go on podcasts with architects who've become builders a fair amount. And it's a pretty common story where I think a lot of kids really into houses and drawing and building stuff. And then they kind of go into the architecture firm world, which is a little bit more, I don't want to say it's all corporate, but it's really less involved in the construction. It's an easy place to get burnt out. It's a tough business model if you can even get introduced to the business model. So eventually kind of evolved throughout a career progression to go back to graduate school and try and learn more about how architects or design can be more accessible to more people. Because I was always looking at, new home construction was pretty vanilla, right? It was a really efficient way to deliver a space, but really wasn't that inspired. So I was trying to understand how architects could actually be involved in, housing. What I found was architects over the decades have tried, and they kind of approach it from trying to change the way that we build things. So modular housing, prefab housing, it happened post-war. There was case study homes. Frank Lloyd Wright did it with Usonian homes. All these great architects tried to do this, and they pretty much tried to change the way that we built things. And in my thesis, I argued or discovered that, maybe the problem isn't changing the building systems. Maybe the problem is that architects need to rethink our service process and our design systems. Maybe what's making construction so expensive that's well designed is the design process and the hand-holding that's involved with it. So I tried to look at a way, and this was 2010, so 14 years ago, to kind of look at an idea of permeative design. It's a system where an architect can design a framework, but doesn't necessarily have to change drawings. It involves, the user or the home buyer to be able to shape it and then have builders contribute to it. So anyway, that's what I got really excited about, was just trying to rethink in this technology world how we can think about that in the design world. And that led to working for a developer, and that led to meeting my now business partner, Russ, who was the director of construction at the developer. And we said, well, I think we can, spin off and do architecture and construction on our own in a service model. And we started doing that about 12 years ago. And that's essentially how I got started. It's been a very fast 12 years, that's for sure.
I can imagine. So you started basically the business 12 years ago. How fast did it grow?
Well, we started doing something a little bit different. It was really more of an opportunity because it was, let's see, 12 years ago, it was 2012, right? So we're kind of coming out of the housing crash, and there was the foreclosure, there's a mortgage crisis. So there's a lot of companies that were buying massive amounts of foreclosed homes. Big institutional money was coming in, and they needed people to quickly convert beat up old foreclosed homes into rental properties. So I have an architecture background. This was not design focused from a, architectural design, but we had to design a system to be able to quickly deliver houses. So back then we had a unique angle that Russ and I were pretty sophisticated, but we weren't actually going to be doing the work. We weren't going to be swinging the hammers. And the institutional guys can't just go directly to the guys that are swinging the hammers, because a lot of those guys don't really have the capabilities to understand their CRM, their Salesforce system, to be able to do scopes and pricing and all those things. They want to come and do the work. So we were a pretty good middleman in being able to organize the crews, work well with our clients, deliver projects quickly and efficiently, build like an iPad app to be able to do some stuff. Whatever we could do to really streamline the back end of that so that everyone got paid quickly and the projects were turned over efficiently was really our goal.
So you basically created a process, from what I'm hearing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was critical. I mean, the margins in that world were absolutely tiny, and the big institutional money wasn't there yet. So we knew our time was limited. We thought we had like an 18-month window where they needed us before they built out their own, management structure and system. So we just kind of ran with it and just used we weren't that sophisticated, but used whatever tools we could to be able to quickly communicate, project, run schedules, keep our crews informed, make sure scopes were clear, things like that. But that wasn't what we wanted to do for the rest of our lives. That was just kind of an instant company, right? And then we started doing remodels and additions. I did my own house. We didn't know that there was necessarily a market for, I wouldn't say we're super high-end design, but higher level design and remodeling. And turns out there was. So people started hiring us. We thought we knew what we're doing, but we were kind of felt like we were playing in a world of less sophistication. The remodeling industry amongst professional construction and design is kind of considered, the bottom of the barrel in the worlds that I lived in. So, I don't know if we really knew where we could take it. I think our thinking was always to become builders, like new construction builders, spec builders. But then we met up with Remodeling's Advantage in Victoria, and we realized, and we thought we were super novel in everything that we were doing in this good design through design build model and full collaboration between architecture and construction. But then we joined Remodeling's Advantage and realized, wow, there's a lot of great companies throughout the country that are doing really similar things. Maybe they're a little bit more construction heavy and a little less design heavy, or more. There's a lot of architect owned who are super design heavy, offering architecture services as well as construction. So we really realized there was this whole world of this, and it was extremely helpful to start to understand the companies that were way ahead of us and building their systems and processes, what we needed to do, right? What we needed to put in place over time to be able to do the fishing role where I can go fishing for a week and not have to worry about it, right? And also hire new people and onboard and be able to scale, be able to run more efficiently and keep our clients informed, client satisfaction. I mean, there's a billion things, right, where we need a process for, so that everybody knows what they're doing at the company and they're not stepping on each other's feet, they're not overlapping. make it as clear as possible, right? So our growth happened, I would guess like 5 years ago is when we really started digging into that, maybe 6 years ago. And then we went from 1 million, we're about 5 million now. So we're about 5 times the size. Went from 2 people, now we're 11. And then we have, a large labor pool of subcontractors.
So you would say that basically having the processes in place allowed you to 5x your income.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you have 2 owners, there's a certain margin and certain revenue you need to achieve. So when you start to build that business model out and really understand like what you're going to need to do, you're going to have some sort of a playbook in place to be able to bring people on to do it. When it's just 2 people who own the company, it's a little bit more, figured out as you go. And even once you have it figured out, once you've done it and you have it figured out, still not writing it down because you already know how to do it. Russ can do a schedule in his sleep, right? Doing a Microsoft project schedule like that, right? But then you bring on somebody else, they need to understand how we need the schedule to be. I can do drawings all day long, but I need to make sure that whoever we hire knows that we have a drawing standard of what those need to look like, so there's consistency across the board.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, it's quite a statement to say that, okay, you implemented processes and procedures, or you implemented systems, and that created like a 5x increase of your income, which is, basically it 5x'd your income.
Well, it's a lot of work too.
Oh, absolutely. Nobody thinks it will happen overnight. So it's hard work, but it's worth it, right?
Right.
What is the best process that you feel like you have right now in your company that is working very well?
Oh my goodness. Just one. So one of my favorite, and this is just automations. This is just using technology, right? So when COVID happened and things started to shut down, I was no longer, because I do all of our sales, I was no longer going to people's houses. It switched to Zoom calls. So, just quickly getting a Calendly subscription so that people can then click on a link and then book a call with me. And then that kicks in a MailChimp that then starts a sequence of emails prepping them for what we're going to talk about, what our company background is, who our team is, all of these things. So all that happens automatically. And with that, as it goes, then Luann back at the office also logs that lead to make any correspondence and all information. So that's one of my favorites. Anything that's automated, I love, right? I know that can be a little bit scary, so you don't want to automate everything. But when we have something that I don't have to do anything and it pops into my calendar, I know what I need to do. It takes minimal prep for me, because once I open that calendar link, it has all the information I need to know about the client. I can pull up their house on Zillow, all that information. So I love the automation aspects of it. I would say in a more playbook process sense, having preset meeting agendas has been huge for us. We have a really clear, so now that you have me thinking about it, like there's a million things, right, that we don't even think about anymore, because we have a process for when someone signs on with us. This is what we're going to do. We're going to field measure. After we field measure, we're going to schedule our design review with you. At that design review, we're going to schedule our next design review. And then we're going to talk about the detailed design process. And then detailed design process, we have our selections day. And then we have DD meeting number 1, DD meeting number 2. This is what we're going to review. And then we have contract and pricing review meeting. And then we have construction start, right? So we already know all the steps that we're going to do. And we can.
So what do you think that knowledge actually does to the company? What does it do to you, to the employees in the company, to your estimators, to your project managers? How does that create order in the company?
I don't even think we think about it anymore, because imagine in a world where we didn't know when our next contract meeting was going to be, how do we plan for it? Or how do you design without a deadline too? That's another thing, right?
Right. So what you're saying is basically without it, there would have been chaos, right? But right
Absolutely.
now, the orderliness and the ability, do you feel like it allows you to actually take on more projects with not necessarily increasing the amount of staff?
Yes. Or I would say if we didn't have it, we would be able to handle way less projects, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So because it just goes on for forever and things just stack up and you don't know when it's going to end. And sometimes you have those stragglers still and stuff will happen right outside of the system. And it doesn't mean that the system shuts down. You know, we adapt to it, but we still kind of try and maintain it. And then we try and rein our clients back to the track that we're trying to hit. And then if we need more time after we've hit all of our meeting deadlines, you know, we charge them another design agreement fee to extend it, right? And it kind of resets through it. So having that structured and then having every meeting agenda, we have what we call a PALO, which is purpose, agenda, logistics, and outcome, which is at the top of every meeting agenda, which is preset. We don't do it as much anymore, but you know, we could, if it's a big project where we think that there's going to be a lot of objections or different things that we need to talk about, we'll do a pre-meeting walkthrough. Let's do a dry run of this, right? To be properly prepared. But for the most part, we don't have to do a whole lot of meeting prep other than the deliverables, because it's the same thing we've done it a million times with just a different deliverable or different project, right? It's
Absolutely.
it's the anxiety reduction when it's consistently the same and you don't have to think about it. The brain, you know, the headspace saving is significant, right?
Yeah, so it's anxiety reduction, peace of mind, consistency, ability to actually service more clients. What effect does it have on your clients? I mean, when you have a new client and you go over, okay, here is our process, this is what's going to happen. How do you think it actually affects your clients?
I think most of them are blown away that we're that organized on the front end because they haven't seen it. But they are used to it because our clients are professionals. So this is what they deal with in their world. And I will tell you, if we don't do it or if we miss a step, they will swoop in and force their system onto us. Like they just will. And then I mean, any other small business out there who's been through that, where all of a sudden the client's driving the boat, you're like, how did that just happen? Right now your process falls apart and then you're back into chaos again, right?
Yeah,
So
totally.
totally.
You know, it's interesting, like how do you maintain the processes alive in the company? What is your strategy for maintaining the processes and making sure that they're not obsolete and they're actually up to date?
That's a great question, especially when you're really busy. It's hard to you know, make adjustments. So when we do have time or we find something that didn't work or a gap in it, then we fill that in. That's kind of the most important thing. And a lot of times if we have an issue, we have to first identify if is it a process issue or a personnel issue, right? Sometimes it's a personnel issue. Like the process is there, they're just not doing it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I say. It's like a people problem or a process problem. You have to identify what it is. So you're spot on. Yeah, I mean, you know, we recommend for our clients like regular process review, because a process review can be driven by event or can be driven by time. Meaning, like, as you said, like if something happens and you need to revise the process, you need to do it right there on the spot. But there should also be a time-driven process review, meaning like every so often all the processes get reviewed and they get those that are not up to date needs to become up to date.
Absolutely. No, I think that makes perfect sense. I mean, it's really easy to dive in and fix a process when it's failing, right? But we should look at the ones that can be better, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And what are some of your best practices in terms of making sure that those processes are followed by all in your organization?
Well, we run on an EOS system, right? So we're a small company, we're only 11 people, but we have department heads that are making sure that you know, the processes are followed is the idea. I mean, for the most part, if they're not followed, you see it because something misses or something's not right, and then we can point back to it and say, well, we missed this step. For construction, we have a lot of checklists that need to be reviewed, filled out, and signed off. And it's up to the department head to hold their employees accountable to that. You know, across the board, I think in our office, we have our main, right in the center is a huge project board. It has every project and every phase or every step, I wouldn't say every step, there's a trillion steps, right? But every kind of like design phase, and there's a yellow, green, or red, right? So yellow means it's upcoming, green means it's complete, red means like this isn't right. So that's also our visual that we can see like, why is that red? We didn't submit for permit. We should have submitted for permit, 3 months ago, right? So we try and introduce visuals too. So everything kind of feeds into that overall, are we on track, off track in terms of different phases? And it's important. I mean, you have my mind spinning right now because it's amazing how many little pieces and parts go into all this, right? Because every employee also needs to know what their job description is, what they're accountable for, what's important to them. Otherwise, they're just pointing fingers all over the place. Like not just what they do on a daily basis, but what they're in charge of, right? What they're held to task on. So that's another piece.
That is very super important and has to be done. Absolutely. And, to that point, it seems like you created a culture of accountability, and you created a culture that is process-driven culture, because you probably, maybe you're not aware of it, or maybe you are, but probably when you hire somebody, you make sure that they are actually that they adjust, that they're basically a good fit for your culture, and that in order to be a good fit for your culture, they have to be process oriented. You're not going to hire somebody who is refusing to use processes, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I would say we have a very specific process for our hiring as well.
Right. Yeah.
People either like or they don't, or if they don't like it, they probably don't appreciate process. Like this is what we do.
Yeah, the same here. We have a very specific process, and if you cannot follow the process, then you don't like processes, and that already eliminates that person because it's not the right fit. Yeah. What would you say to some people out there that are right now on the fence of like, yeah, I know processes are important, but should I invest in it? Should I actually do it? What would you say to them?
Well, no, you have to. It's kind of like, well, you just have to for everything, even in your own family life. Like you're going to have a calendar, right? Or something. There has to be, a starting point to start to outline different sequences that you do every day. And then I think the cool part is once you just write those things down and identify them, then you can start to fill in some of the pieces with technology that might be able to help, right? So you'll get that time back, across the board. But it is overwhelming. Our first RA meeting where we did Jumpstart with Victoria, I was like, almost in tears, and she gave me a big hug because you realize how much you need to do. But she's like, it doesn't happen overnight. You just have to start, and then you kind of keep building. And then the other piece of that is once your team starts to understand it, and our team the last year has just been like unbelievable on this stuff. They start building the processes. They start seeing what needs to improve and what we need to define better. And they start doing it from their point of view. Because as an owner, just creating everything and making it go down, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily good, because you're not in the trenches every day to know it. So I really want to make sure the team is shaping it as well.
That's so true. And I've seen it so many times. We go into companies, we create our processes and procedures, and said like in the beginning, it's hard, right? Because people usually the objection is, where am I going to find the time? Where is my team going to find the time? Because we do work with fast growing companies that are lacking consistency. They're not just sitting and doing nothing. They're working hard already. And all I said, okay, I build this the way that we do it in such a way that they can do it, but get started. Because once you start, you're putting order, and then you put more order. And then that understanding of processes will come into place, and people will start looking for efficiencies. They will basically have this buy-in of that process-driven culture and process-driven organization, without losing the good culture and the people culture as well. But it will become this way of thinking, a new way of thinking that will just bring more and more order, and people are going to take ownership of creating those processes and make them more efficient.
Yeah, and besides the efficiency part of it, and this relates to efficiency, but I'm a person who way back in the day used to be proud of the fact that my brain was always thinking and I was always working. I was like, wait, that's not actually healthy. So if you can find processes to offload some of those things that you're always thinking about, it actually frees up your head, one for joy right? But two, to prioritize on things that maybe need more thinking than this thing that you're going to do. In the simplest sense is, the method of this silly old school book that I still use to write down, plan my morning, and then A, B, C, D it.
I have my book too.
And it's, to me, it's nothing that I would ever say I need to do because I'm really not that organized, but I appreciate organization. But putting that structure into place, every single thing that I write down is offloaded off of my brain. And now I know that I don't need to think about it because I've already prioritized that as a B or C, right? So,
absolutely. That's how I start my day. I just write everything so that way I can just go and execute and don't have to think about it. So I think it's a very good advice.
yeah, I mean, I just think about that more beyond just, company profitability and all those things. It should be, it should be a way of life that is liberating, right? Is the idea.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, David, thank you so much. I mean, this has been a great conversation. I'm sure our listeners learned a lot as well, because it's always good to listen to a fellow entrepreneur that has made it and still making it, working hard, but putting things in place. And then it gets you also the freedom. Won't you say that you have so much more freedom now than you had when you first started a business?
Absolutely. Yeah, no question, because it allows you to scale, it allows you to build out a team, build out a real, operating company.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, if people want to get a hold of you and ask you more questions, how can they do that? Or maybe they want to check out your company. What should they do?
Yeah, so the easiest way is internet. Our website is livcompanies.com, which is LivCompanies.com. I'm on LinkedIn, so you can look me up there and follow along or reach out to me. That's probably the easiest way. But yeah, check out our work. I think some of the stuff we were talking about before the show started is we do a pretty high level of design as it relates to remodeling work. So having systems and processes to be able to deliver such unique projects is paramount, because there's a lot that we can't control when it comes to construction. So we try and control everything that we can through some sort of process to limit the variables.
Absolutely. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for being a guest on this podcast. It was a pleasure having you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.